Late at night, the garden lights glowed softly as I stood there staring at the empty patch of earth I'd once planned to fill with color. The HOA had stopped me from painting my own garden fence, claiming it disrupted community harmony. I smiled that night, not out of defeat, but because I just thought of the perfect revenge. If they didn't want color in my garden, I'd bring the garden to them, and soon their own office would look like the heart of a jungle. But before we dive into this wild revenge story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't believe how far I went to teach the HOA a lesson they'll never forget. This is a story of patience, creativity, and the sweetest payback imaginable. It started 3 months ago when I moved into a quiet, suburban neighborhood managed by one of the strictest homeowners associations in the city. At first, I didn't think much of their rules. They seemed simple enough. Maintain your lawn, keep your house color neutral, and follow the community aesthetic. I was a landscaper by profession, passionate about bringing life and color into dull spaces. My dream was to create a backyard garden that felt like a living painting, a mix of wildflowers, colorful vines, and artful wooden fencing. But the HOA had other ideas. The moment I painted the first panel of my fence a deep forest green, I received a violation notice. Unapproved color. Must be restored within 48 hours. I thought it was a misunderstanding, so I appealed. Instead, I got a formal warning and a threat of fines. I repainted, angry but compliant. 2 weeks later, they fined me again, this time for improper lawn ornament placement. Apparently, a small stone frog by the fountain wasn't aesthetically compatible. I started noticing a pattern. The HOA president, a woman named Carol, seemed to have a personal issue with me. My home, my garden, every small detail suddenly became a violation. I tried talking to her, but she brushed me off with a condescending smile and a reminder that rules exist for a reason. That's when I began planning. I spent weeks studying their office, the small building near the neighborhood entrance where meetings were held. It was sterile, lifeless, and gray, the complete opposite of what I loved. My plan was simple: turn their dull, rule-obsessed office into the most chaotic, overgrown, nature-filled jungle they'd ever seen, without breaking a single law. First, I started volunteering for community cleanups. It gave me access to the storage area behind the office. Slowly, I began collecting unused gardening tools, soil bags, and old pots. Next, I noticed their sprinkler system was connected to an old maintenance timer, easily programmable. With a bit of tinkering, I set it to run twice as often at odd hours. Then I added a few extra hoses around the back for irrigation tests. Carol didn't notice a thing. Over the next few weeks, I began introducing potted plants around the building under the guise of beautification efforts. I told the board I was helping improve community appeal. They even praised me for it. What they didn't realize was that every pot contained fast-growing vines, species like morning glory and creeping fig, that would soon cover the walls. I also replaced the soil mix with one enriched for wild growth. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it would be too late. One rainy night, I snuck in and planted several tropical seedlings behind the building, near the drainage line. They'd thrive in the excess water from the newly programmed sprinklers. Within a month, the walls were alive with greenery. Ferns sprouted between cracks, vines climbed the office walls, and the dull gray exterior began to disappear beneath a thick carpet of nature. But I wasn't done yet. I installed discreet hanging baskets along the roofline filled with moss and trailing ivy. The humidity from the irrigation system kept them growing fast. Birds and insects started showing up too, drawn by the sudden oasis. Carol began receiving complaints, ironically from other HOA members, about nature taking over the office. She sent maintenance to clean it up, but the vines grew back faster than they could cut them. The system I'd set up ensured constant moisture and perfect growth conditions. Soon, even the air inside the office smelled like soil and rain. When the maintenance team finally discovered the altered timer, I replaced it again overnight. They couldn't keep up. By the end of the second month, the HOA office looked like something out of a rainforest documentary. The vines crawled across the signboard, flowers bloomed around the entrance, and frogs began appearing near the steps. Carol was furious, but every time she tried to assign blame, I reminded her, everything I'd planted had been approved as part of the Community Beautification Initiative. There was no rule against plants. There was no rule against nature. The tension in the neighborhood grew. Half the residents loved the new look, calling it the green heart of the community. The other half sided with Carol, claiming it was unsightly. HOA meetings became chaotic. Carol's frustration reached a boiling point when a raccoon made its home inside the roof vents. It was poetic justice. The very woman who fined me for a decorative frog was now fighting to evict actual wildlife from her precious office. Still, I kept my cool. I offered to help manage the situation. She reluctantly agreed, not realizing it was exactly what I wanted. I replaced the plants she ordered removed with new ones under the excuse of controlling growth, but instead, I switched to even more aggressive vines. Soon the building looked abandoned. Windows were half covered, roots were creeping under doors, and even the mailbox had a small fern growing inside. Carol finally called an emergency meeting to discuss tearing everything down and rebuilding the office. That was when I revealed the final twist. I'd been documenting everything. Every approval, every message, every time she praised my beautification efforts. When she accused me of sabotage, I showed the entire board how she'd personally signed off on every stage. She'd even posed for a community newsletter photo in front of the growing jungle months earlier. The look on her face was priceless. Her credibility crumbled. Residents who'd once supported her began demanding her resignation. If she can't manage a simple garden, one neighbor said, how can she manage the community? Within weeks, Carol stepped down. The new president was far more relaxed and open-minded. They invited me to redesign the community park, this time officially. I accepted, of course, but not before making one final adjustment to the HOA office. I turned it into a full-fledged green lounge, a living space filled with natural light, vines, and flowers, where residents could come to relax. I kept one wall untouched, though, showing the original dull gray beneath all the greenery, a reminder of what happens when rules crush creativity. Before long, the story spread online. People came from nearby towns to see the jungle office. What started as petty HOA revenge became a viral attraction. Local news called it an accidental masterpiece of nature reclaiming concrete. But I knew the truth. It wasn't an accident, it was poetic justice. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's transformation, taking the same thing they tried to control and letting it bloom beyond their reach. Standing there one evening, looking at the lush green building glowing under soft lights, I smiled. The garden I'd been denied had finally found its home, right in the heart of the HOA. The same people who once banned my colors now sat surrounded by them, unknowingly living inside the dream they tried to destroy. It wasn't just revenge anymore, it was art. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more crazy HOA and revenge tales just like this one. Your support helps bring more wild stories to life. Trust me, the next one will be even greener than this.